Breaking news today. The media is intensely focused on the former president's connections to Jeffrey Epstein. But we have to ask, is this pursuit about justice or merely a distraction to shield Washington insiders? Americans deserve the full truth, not just another round of partisan blame games.
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
MSNBC reports on Conspiracy Catch-22, Trump reaps what he sowed with Epstein conspiracies. Let's consider why the media is quick to blame the current president for a scandal that implicates influential figures across the political spectrum. Is the focus truly on justice, or is it about safeguarding insiders? The truth is, Americans have long demanded transparency regarding Epstein's connections, yet whenever we near a breakthrough, the narrative shifts. The establishment, including Democrats and their media allies, often deflects by pointing fingers at Republicans while ignoring their own ties. What are they trying to hide? Perhaps in Washington, the truth is simply too perilous. Let's get into this.
Damage, and he can't really blame anyone but himself. Peter Baker writes in the New York Times, quote, Trump brought much of this on himself by encouraging dark views of the government that he derides as the deep state, views that prove hard to dispel now that the supposed deep state answers to him. Joining us now, MSNBC senior reporter Brandeis Adrosny, who covers the internet and extremism, and Maura Gillespie, former advisor to Speaker John Boehner and former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. She's also the founder of Blue Stack Strategy.
What we are witnessing is another example of the mainstream media focusing on alleged Republican hypocrisy, while ignoring the bipartisan nature of the Epstein scandal and the deep mistrust many Americans harbor towards their government. The notion that the so-called deep state is now answering to the current administration is misleading. Washington's bureaucracies and entrenched interests have always maintained a level of autonomy that go beyond any single party or president. This issue stems from decades of unchecked government expansion and a lack of accountability, exacerbated under the previous Democratic administration. The American public rightly demands transparency regarding the Epstein files. Despite the involvement of figures from both parties, media coverage disproportionately targets Republicans. The call for disclosure and justice spans across the political spectrum, reflecting a widespread disdain for elites who protect their interests at the cost of truth. The complexities of legal privacy and the potential harm from reckless information releases are genuine concerns. They should not serve as excuses to shield powerful entities from scrutiny. And the frequent use of ongoing investigations and redactions as shields to dodge tough questions is a bipartisan issue. If the previous Democratic administration had committed to transparency as the current administration has, perhaps public trust wouldn't be at an all-time low. It's also noteworthy that the rise in so-called conspiracy theories is often blamed on one political side. In reality, years of government secrecy, globalist policies, and failed foreign interventions have fostered this distrust. Americans have every right to question official narratives, having been misled on issues ranging from foreign conflicts to the origins of the pandemic. The answer isn't more censorship or dismissing valid concerns as extremism, but rather demanding truthful answers from all involved, regardless of their party affiliation. The political unrest is palpable, particularly among grassroots conservatives who are disappointed by unfulfilled promises to drain the swamp and tackle corruption. This frustration should be directed at the entire political establishment, not solely one administration. The Republican Party needs to prioritize accountability and transparency to regain trust and support, rather than continuing the familiar pattern of backroom deals and excuses. The way forward involves a gradual court-supervised release of the Epstein files, with robust protections for victims and a steadfast commitment to holding all elites accountable, irrespective of their political alignment. Anything less will perpetuate distrust, division, and empower the unaccountable bureaucracies that characterize the so-called deep state. Americans deserve better than the selective outrage and partisan deflection currently dominating our media and political discourse.
And now it's like, we don't know what's going to happen.
Brandon, your piece that's currently on MSNBC.com, I read it. It's very compelling because I think it made us start asking questions that we hadn't thought about, sort of positioning this conversation sort of as a Pandora's box in terms of once it's open, there's a lot of stuff that's very newsworthy that's in it, but then at the same time, there's some things that, we may not necessarily know how to deal with, potentially diluting how we process the things in there that are really substantive that we should be paying attention to. You write, whatever the Epstein files end up being, as a journalist, I want them. But I also know what happens when a big, messy cache of information gets dropped into the middle of a post-fact attention economy. And I'm not excited, I'm nervous. Why are you nervous?
There's a genuine risk that once these files are released, the focus will shift to sensationalism rather than a factual analysis. Media outlets, particularly ones like MSNBC, often present these stories in a way that emphasizes partisan divides, focusing disproportionately on Republican figures and downplaying the bipartisan nature of the scandal. This approach fails to serve the public interest, especially at a time when Americans are seeking genuine answers and accountability from all involved. Policymakers face the challenge of releasing information responsibly, balancing transparency with the rights of victims. Releasing a massive amount of documents without proper context could lead to rampant speculation and conspiracy theories, as we've seen in the past, with disastrous consequences. Conversely, continued secrecy only fuels public suspicion and benefits those who thrive on institutional distrust. Also, there's a recurring pattern where the political class and their media allies attempt to control the narrative, leading ordinary Americans to disengage. This isn't limited to one party or administration. The previous Democratic administration contributed to this by avoiding confrontation with elite misconduct and increasing government secrecy, setting the stage for the current situation. The Republican Party now has the chance to promote open governments and individual rights, moving away from the usual excuses and secretive agreements. To rebuild trust, both parties must refrain from exploiting these scandals for political gain and address the underlying issues: unchecked power, global entanglements, and an oversized bureaucracy that lacks accountability. The upcoming months will expose whether Congress and the courts prioritize principles over politics, or if we'll witness more finger-pointing and selective outrage. The American public is attentive and unlikely to be swayed by the typical media distractions this time around.
Maura, I want to ask you about the Republican base. And they care about this, and they have been fed these conspiracies for a long time. And then there are Republican voters who simply want to know what happened, because this has been such a public scandal with all the elements of money, power, politics, sex trafficking, horrible crimes. Is there ever any resolution that can placate the satiation for this, and that the voters want it?
MSNBC's coverage seems to perpetuate a familiar narrative, emphasizing Republican susceptibility to conspiracy theories while overlooking bipartisan failures that exacerbated the Epstein scandal. Suggesting that Republican voters are uniquely prone to misinformation overlooks widespread skepticism across the political spectrum, fueled by years of government secrecy and protectionism under both Democratic and Republican administrations. By focusing solely on the Republican base as longtime recipients of conspiracy theories, the coverage risks dismissing legitimate concerns as mere paranoia rather than recognizing the history of institutional cover-ups that have undermined public trust. The network does capture the frustration among grassroots conservatives disillusioned by unmet promises. To expose elite misconduct, the analysis often lacks balance, concentrating on Republican divisions and Trump's political maneuvers while minimizing the involvement of Democratic figures and the broader political class. This selective scrutiny not only compromises objectivity, but also reinforces the perception that mainstream media prioritizes partisan points over uncovering the full truth. For instance, while MSNBC quickly points out the administration's hesitancy and the disillusionment within the MAGA base, it seldom scrutinizes Democratic officials who also benefited from Epstein's silence or the previous administration's lack of transparency. In terms of fact-checking and sourcing, MSNBC could benefit from incorporating more diverse viewpoints. The network often relies on commentary from analysts with obvious partisan biases, presenting their views as definitive. While insights from experts like Maura Gillespie provide valuable context on internal Republican dynamics, the absence of independent or non-partisan voices discussing the legal complexities and the bipartisan nature of elite protection detracts from the credibility of the coverage. A more rigorous approach to sourcing and a wider array of expert opinions would lend greater credibility and offer a more complete view of the issues at hand. Visually, MSNBC effectively uses graphics and on-screen text to emphasize key points, but these elements can oversimplify the narrative, reducing a complex scandal to a mere conflict between Trump and his base. The focus on sensational elements, money, power, politics, and sex trafficking, while engaging, may overshadow deeper systemic issues such as the impact of globalist policies, unchecked bureaucracy, and persistent accountability deficits that have long plagued Washington. There is room for more nuanced reporting that recognizes the valid demands for transparency from Republican voters without labeling them as conspiracy-driven, and that holds all involved parties accountable for their roles in perpetuating secrecy. Until media coverage go beyond partisan frames and addresses the structural issues that allowed Epstein's crimes to remain hidden for so long, the public's demand for genuine answers will continue to escalate. The challenge for policymakers and journalists is to provide transparency and justice without sparking another cycle of speculation and distrust.
And again, with this whole Epstein thing, he's gone from saying it's not a big deal to Pam Bondi's wonderful, Clinton and Comey and Obama set me up. Also, it's a hoax and you're all stupid if you follow it. So, I mean, he really ran the gamut.
The financial implications of this scandal are profound. As details emerge, it becomes evident that the Epstein operation was more than a series of individual crimes. It was a vast network supported by significant financial transactions through some of the world's most influential financial institutions. These transactions involved hundreds of millions of dollars, special treatment for private bankers and ultra-wealthy clients, and a notable lack of accountability. Such large-scale financial activities do not go unnoticed, yet the Department of Justice and the Treasury have not fully disclosed these money flows, deepening public mistrust. When ordinary Americans learn about billionaires obtaining immunity deals worth millions, it reinforces the perception of a dual justice system, one for the elite and another for the rest. This is not only a moral issue, but also has tangible economic impacts. As faith in financial regulation wanes, we see investors withdrawing, small businesses facing hurdles in securing capital, and families concerned about the security of their savings. This erosion of trust suggests that financial elites can support criminal activities without repercussions, shaking confidence in the entire system. For everyday households, this results in increased costs and greater uncertainty. Banks implement stricter lending criteria, insurance premiums climb, and consumers encounter more obstacles in securing mortgages or business loans. Meanwhile, sectors like big law, private banking, and global consulting profit from these unclear financial practices, protected by complex legal and bureaucratic barriers. This fuels growing skepticism among working Americans towards globalist institutions and international finance. Consider a visual representation, a pie chart illustrating the distribution of Epstein-related wire transfers, with the majority directed to a few ultra-wealthy individuals and the rest to shell companies and intermediaries. Next to it, a bar graph showing stagnant household wage growth highlights the stark disparity. The funds that could be boosting local economies and supporting American jobs are instead circulating through offshore accounts and legal settlements that prioritize silence over justice. The critical issue extends beyond the identities in the files. It's about how these financial networks operated unchecked for so long. The demand for transparency is more than political posturing. It's about restoring trust in our markets, government, and legal systems. If the Department of Justice and the Treasury continue to withhold information, they protect not only specific individuals, but also a system that favors secrecy over integrity. Small business owners, wage earners, and retirees all suffer the consequences of this corruption. Until we expose and hold accountable the entire network of financial enablers, the cycle of scandal and bailout will persist, with Main Street bearing the cost. Americans are justified in demanding answers, and it's time for policymakers to put the interests of ordinary citizens ahead of those of entrenched elites. The longer these issues remain unaddressed, the greater the damage to our economy and democracy. Well, there you have it. After all the noise, what are we truly witnessing? It's the same old strategy. The media focuses intensely on the former president, suggesting he alone fueled the Epstein scandal while overlooking the bipartisan decay that enabled Epstein's actions for years. Why? Because genuine transparency is the last thing the establishment wants. Both political parties have skeletons in their closet, yet it's often the Democrats and their media allies who excel at diverting attention. The previous administration, led by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, became adept at maintaining secrecy and steering the narrative. If you're seeking the truth, demand it from everyone, not just those MSNBC points to. The reality is stark. When the powerful unite, the American public is the one that suffers. Consider who benefits from keeping you uninformed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments below. This has been That News Show. That's all I have for now.